Okay, so now we're ready to get started. For those of you new to ITSM Academy, here's a quick overview. ITSM Academy is a full-service provider of IT service management education. We develop all content in-house, and that includes all ITIL education, as well as process design, Agile, and DevOps. Since 2003, we've trained and certified tens of thousands of students. Now let me introduce today's speaker, Ann Hungate. Ann discovered her passion for software quality after working in multiple IT roles such as developer, analyst, and program project manager for more than 20 years in major companies and consulting firms. Experimenting with both engineering practices and organizational design, Ann determined that people and trust are the keys to better software. Most recently, she led the global quality team for a leading financial services organization, helping the team prepare for Agile adoption. She has presented at local and national conferences, sharing the lessons learned on her software quality journey. Ann holds DevOps Foundation, DevOps Test Engineer, CSQA, and PMP certifications. You can follow her on Twitter. Her Twitter handle is @Anne, A-N-N-E, Hungate, H-U-N-G-A-T-E. Good morning, Ann. Thank you for joining us. Ann, are you muted?
I am no longer muted.
Good morning. Are you ready for me to make you the presenter?
I am ready to be the presenter.
Okay. Give me just a second. And there you go. We are very much looking forward to your presentation today.
All right. I am working on.
Go ahead, get it set up and I'll tell you when I can see it.
Okay. It is. I'm not getting the same choices as yesterday, so I'll do this choice instead. Did that work?
Not just yet.
All right. Let's try this. How about that?
Perfect.
All right. Well, great. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for your time. I'm excited about being here today. As Karen mentioned, my name's Ann Hungate, and my firm was really started to help individuals and organizations that are migrating to and adopting DevOps. So you can follow me at Ann Hungate. I've really just started ramping up my Twitter this year, and I'm really enjoying it. So please follow me, and let's have some conversations over Twitter. But today, we are going to, let's see, try that. We're going to talk about continuous testing. It's also known as DevOps testing. And I went to the State of DevOps website, and they had a great diagram that showed what all the components of DevOps are. So I can tell, just looking, we've got 70% of the folks on the phone haven't been through DevOps Foundation yet. About half are adding some DevOps testing or are working on DevOps teams. So I'm sure folks are familiar with this. So for the DevOps report, the emphasis before today has really been on the three C's of continuous integration, continuous deployment, and continuous delivery. Those 3 C's are not possible without continuous testing, which is the silent backbone of DevOps. Today's talk is really going to take a personal turn because this is my understanding of continuous testing has been a 9-year journey where I've made some mistakes and I've had some successes, and I hope that I can share the lessons I've learned on my journey to accelerate yours so it doesn't take 9 years. I also have discovered a parallel journey that I think is going to make this conversation go easily. So when we walk away today, everybody should have an appreciation of 4 main things. First is an understanding of what DevOps testing, also known as continuous testing, is. A full appreciation of the definition and an application of it. Next is everyone should walk away understanding about the DevOps Test Engineer role, how it fits in, how we prepare for it. Third, I want everyone to have some insight into the challenges that they're going to experience driving the adoption of DevOps testing. And we get some really practical strategies to overcome. And finally, I try to leave my webinars really focused on 3 points, but this 4th point is important today. It's a personal call to action to prepare for continuous testing. Because even if it's not happening in your organization, if it's not happening in your team, it doesn't have to stop you from learning more about it and getting prepared. So with that, we're going to really focus right now for the next few minutes on what continuous testing is. So with that, I went straight to Wikipedia. That's where I go for all my best information, right? My kids don't even know what encyclopedias are because we've moved a few times and the encyclopedias found their way to a used bookstore. We use Wikipedia often. So the definition of continuous testing, which is synonymous with DevOps testing, is a process of executing automated tests as part of the software delivery pipeline to obtain immediate feedback on the business risks associated with the software. I put arrows next to the 4 hot points in this definition because what we're going to do is we're going to break it down and reorder it. I have observed people really struggling with adopting DevOps testing or continuous testing because they're hung up on automated. They get to the word automated and stop right there. We are going to reorganize these because the 4 key elements of the DevOps or continuous testing definition are better off put in this order. So if you're trying to drive your understanding of them, let's organize them this way. The first key point is that DevOps or continuous testing happens at every stage of the pipeline. We emphasize the business value. Third is we provide feedback, and 4th is automated. So we're not even going to get to automated until we cover those 3 spots. So starting in the first stage, before I go to the next slide, a quick story. I was teaching a workshop about 6 weeks ago and discovered that about 1/3 of the folks in the room had heard the terms shift left, but didn't have a good visual of it, didn't understand the concept of shift left. First time I saw this graph, a bell curve, was early in my college days, and a professor of analytics said he found software development humorous because software developers were acting like we didn't apply to the bell curve. The idea, if you look at the bell curve, what he's saying is that your resources, which are on the y-axis, they include money, people, machine time. Over the course of a project, whether your project's developing software, building a house, planning a party, we really follow the bell curve. So over time, we'll gradually peak out at the number of resources we spend. If we treat testing as a phase, and we do it after development, it's too late. We've already peaked on resource expenditure. We are already so far along the timeline that if we've made a mistake, we can't go backwards. It's powerful. It goes back to my house painting days. So in college, I worked as an exterior house painter. And I learned a few things as a crew leader. I had to get the job done on time, on budget, to the right level of quality so we weren't getting called to a callback. I had to make the homeowner happy, my crew happy, and my boss. And I'll tell you what, every job I started with a walkthrough of the estimate. I reviewed the estimate, and then I walked the homeowner around the house. And we talked through the estimate, made sure that what the homeowner had bought, I understood, and that the homeowner understood what they'd purchased, because there's always breakdowns in communication. So the walk around was a really powerful activity. I could learn the nuances, where there were trees or a slanted sidewalk, or where the kid's bedroom was and what time they were taking a nap, if there were dogs, if there was sunlight issue, if there was water damage. It was understanding what I was walking into and making sure the homeowner knew I understood. How does this apply to testing? If I get to the end of the job and go to get paid and the homeowner's like, what? You didn't take care of the water damage, or you woke up my kid from a nap, or look at these trees you've destroyed, then I haven't satisfied the requirements. So shift left is executing tests as early in the life cycle as possible, when we still have the chance to make changes before the peak expenditure of money. The reason it matters, in the 70s, a gentleman, a GE engineer named Barry Bain, I think he's with IBM also, did some math, and he basically showed that finding and fixing defects gets mathematically more expensive. And other organizations have gone through, and I grabbed the ASTQB and the IBM calculations, but basically the cost of finding and fixing a defect becomes cost prohibitive. So the first part of continuous testing, the first phase of the definition, is that it happens at every stage in the pipeline. And look, it doesn't need to just happen in a DevOps environment. If your organization hasn't gotten to DevOps yet, it's okay. If your team is doing a flavor of DevOps, it's not fully vetted, you can still introduce the most powerful, impactful 20% of the definition, which is testing at every phase. Did you know you can test your ideas? And you can test requirements. You test ideas by putting a little business model around them. Does this make sense? It's the walkthrough with the homeowner. Did you really want to paint your house canary yellow, or did you want a more muted tone? And don't laugh, I did once actually paint the side of a house canary yellow, and the homeowner came home and panicked. So we start on the left. When we shift left, I'm using air quotes, they're always fun on a webinar. When you shift left, you start with static testing. Those of you who are going to be taking the DevOps Test Engineering course, we talk a lot about the difference between static and dynamic testing and the different static and dynamic tests you can execute. Folks not familiar with the term static testing, static is a test we run that doesn't involve executing the software. You can still automate them, but a static test might be looking at your business model. It might be a static review of requirements. It could be a static code check. I love static tests. You can create checklists that keep you, did I do this, did I do this, do I do this? So you make a decision point, a decision at every phase. Am I ready to go to the next phase? Are my artifacts ready to move on? Quick story on static testing. In 2010, I had a group of BAs and QAs on one team and release. And we had a really tough project, a project that we had tried and failed a few times as a company before. And so my boss knew I was a big proponent of static testing. He said, why don't you give static testing a try on this project? And so I had to go around and lobby, build that coalition of support internally. And I went to my business partner. I said, we want to add this static testing process with requirements before we go into design and development. And he says, what are you going to give me, Ann? I said, what do you mean, what am I going to give you? I just want 2 weeks up front so we can add static testing. And he says, that's not the way it works, Hungate. He said, if you want to add 2 weeks up front, you're going to have to give up 2 weeks in the back. Guys, I was panicked. I had only 6 weeks to test an application we were going to spend the better part of a year building, and he wanted me to cut it to 4 weeks so that I could get the 2 weeks that I wanted up front. And I'd never done this at scale before. I didn't know if it was going to work. But I'm, in a scary moment, I took the leap because I'm kind of a risk taker, and I looked him in the eye and said, you got it. I will take 2 weeks off of testing and you won't regret it. Well, naturally I'm panicked because I've never done this before, but I didn't act panic to his face. That 2 weeks of static testing, guys, ended up going 4 weeks. And this is slightly embarrassing we found 864 defects. 864 defects, which tells me many things. First of all, that our process of eliciting and analyzing, collecting requirements was terribly broken. And the second is that we were never going to get through development if we hadn't done this activity. Fast forward to the end of the project. We were able to get through all of our system testing in 10 business days. It's the fastest we've ever gotten through. We had almost no defects, and we had no critical or high priority defects because we've done the static testing. Let's look what this looks like in a DevOps environment. If you guys are familiar with the DevOps loop, I encourage you to go to the state of DevOps. I pulled this image off of Wikipedia. I love it. It's the idea is that we are moving seamlessly from creating, planning, packaging, verifying, to release. We move seamlessly. But DevOps testing, so continuous testing in a DevOps cycle, means it's embedded and integrated with each one of these steps. So those of you who are going to take a DevOps engineering course, you're going to learn about the different test strategies that are employed, embedded in each one of these. But it's important to note you don't actually limit yourself to just one strategy. There are strategies to ensure the environment is ready, strategies to validate interdependencies of code, strategies to leverage virtualization, and tools that can accelerate your automation. Where I'm most excited about automation today, you guys, is orchestration. Orchestrating of environments and orchestration of your automation and orchestration of your data. What that means, orchestration is when your environment is automatically spun up, or your data is automatically generated, or your code is automatically moved to an environment. This is powerful because if you guys roll back the clock 5, 10 years, when we are trying to build a project, think of that long pole in the tent, getting the servers to build out your test environment, right? Or spending the 2 weeks finding, fixing, scrubbing test data, pulling it out of production and getting it loaded onto servers, and then making sure somebody else doesn't take your test data away or run a test over it and seize it. With DevOps testing and continuous testing, we have automation now that can take those activities from being 2 to 3 weeks and error prone to being 10 to 15 minutes, repeatable, scalable, and then we actually release the environments. So this is what every stage in the pipeline looks like. I know I've spent a lot of time on this, but this is the single most important part of the continuous test, DevOps test definition. Testing happens at every stage. The next piece of the definition is business value. I love this one. If I could see your faces, I'd say show of hands how many people report % complete on test execution. If you've raised your hand, you say, yes, we report % complete. I say, don't bother. And I say, don't bother because the next dimension is business relevance. If you have made it through 80% of your scenarios, but the 20% hardest scenarios you haven't even started yet, you're not really 80% through testing. You may be 5 or 10% through because you're just now starting the heavy lifting. When you do continuous testing, you test the most important, hardest things first. You organize by what matters most, and you get the hard ones done. The next thing is, when a test fails, you have to ask that question, so what? Does it matter? Is it going to be okay? Is it good enough? When we get to lower priority scenarios, then we get to low priority scenarios and something doesn't pass, we may opt to move forward, we may not. But the essence of continuous testing is we organize our scenarios by business value. I'm gonna beat this point just a little bit farther, in that you can tell whether or not you're testing for business value by taking a look historically. Dig through the defects you've found in system test. If you find a high number of low to medium severity defects, then you are not testing for business value. What you want to do is find fewer defects of higher quality, just harder defects. That's a way to test to see whether or not you're doing it right now or not. The third definite point part of the continuous testing definition is feedback. We get feedback incrementally. So now we're testing at each stage, and we're testing small chunks of code. We get feedback. Did this small chunk work? And then we make decisions. So picture in your head a pearl necklace. You know, just 10 years ago, the way we tested is we didn't start testing the necklace until it was built. But now that we're working in continuous testing, we're getting feedback on small chunks. So before we ever string that pearl necklace together, we test every pearl for color, size, quality. Is it what we want it to be? And then we test the string. Is the string thick enough, strong enough? We test the clasp. Does it work? Does it open, close? Does it stay shut? When we know each of these components works satisfactorily, then we string the necklace together. So what we do is we make a call. So getting feedback. We get feedback. We've tested the highest priority thing. We've got criterion that say, should we accept it? Should we reject it? Should we put it on hold? And we make these decisions deliberately. I heard a pretty frightening story yesterday. A colleague of mine as a partner that tests in an old-fashioned machine way, and he decided to run a test with his with a team that was doing testing. He felt like they weren't really giving them good feedback, that they weren't really doing the accurate assessment he expected. So what he did is he removed the configuration file from the test, shipped it off. The group doing the testing, the old-time testing, sent back a test results file saying everything was fine. There was no way they could have executed the test. There was no config file in it. We don't have problems like false positives when you're dealing with continuous testing, when you work in small chunks and get assessments. All right. The last piece of what is continuous testing. So 3 points before I get to this slide. The first thing about test automation is that your automation tools should not be separate from your development and enterprise architecture tools. They should not be separate. A lot of folks, again, I've overused my polling. Karen told me I had a lot of poll questions. But just taking a look at the folks we've got on the phone, you know, we've got just under half the folks on the phone are from the DevOps teams. But we have over half of our team is either a manager or domain leader. And so my question pointed to you guys is how many of you have a cohesive set of tools that you didn't just inherit, or you haven't done one-offs, but you've actually worked with your development and architecture team to get tools that are fully integrated. The next thing to consider with automation is that all linear tests can be automated. You're going to hear a lot of feedback saying, you know, we can't automate away testing. There's still, we need to do exploratory testing and some non-conventional testing. And my message to you guys is that when we're testing data, services, and processes with no UI, automated testing is the best and almost exclusively what you need. In addition, when you're testing linear logic, when I say linear logic, I mean Is the system doing what it said it would do and not doing what it said it wouldn't do? That's all linear, yes or no. Automate it. These are the bulk of our test conditions. It lets us get through our testing. And if we go back to the last slide, that we're performing assessments, it tells us pretty quickly whether or not we can move forward. Where we need manual testing is when we have nonlinear activity, or we need to generate unpredictable behavior, or we need to understand a user's experience. Those are very human, and that remains manual. So my last piece before we really talk about the content of the slide is that automation itself becomes an asset. A lot of folks automate and they don't really think about the fact that automation is code, which means we need coding standards, code reviews, we need to track reuse, we need to monitor for technical debt, we need constant training and refinement. One of the challenges with the early days of automation is that we were building up these giant repositories of scenarios and not checking to see if they were relevant, if they were reused, if they complied with standards, if they were secure. So let's look at the slide here. So the last piece of continuous testing, which is not the first, the last piece is that it's automated. I want to stress that your automation is, when you're in a DevOps environment, your automation is integrated right into the DevOps master framework. So as you move through the DevOps pipeline, your automation, your testing happens automatically. It is kicked off. So a production equivalent test environment is orchestrated and built up. Your data are provisioned. You can even generate all your scenarios. You can automate the execution. You can automate the analysis and reporting, and when you're done, your environment is released automatically. It's extremely powerful. Let's look on that automated scenario generation. If we think about that pipeline, when you're back in requirements, if your requirements are thorough and accurate and complete and understand your data and the interdependencies, there's tooling. You can even develop algorithms in your own organizations that will automatically generate all the test scenarios. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. It's pretty powerful. If you can auto-generate your scenarios, your environment, your data, and kick off the execution, this is a big change in a role that, I'm going to go way back up here into the good old days when we had developers waiting here, or we had testers waiting till about midpoint through development and starting to build test strategies. Just getting here and starting to write testing here and coming up with your strategies and planning out your environment. And then it's very powerful when all of this is happening continuously in an automated fashion. Now, here's my last point on automated. The DevOps test framework is not separate from the development environment. We have siloed organizations. You have a dev organization, you have a test organization, you have a BA organization. Everybody's got your own set of tools. A DevOps test framework is integrated into those tools, right? Your tools have to work with the development tools. We're going to talk about it a little bit later. In the last section of this thing, we're going to talk about your tools, but I don't want you to throw the baby out with the bathwater. You might have tools right now that are very good and serve a very specific purpose. There's a good chance if you follow the first 3 steps of the definition, you can keep using those tools. But you need to get these first 3 dimensions of the definition right and then start automating, because automation is not a silver bullet. If you automate the wrong stuff, the wrong way at the wrong time, you're actually going to create problems and technical debt for your organization. And we don't want to do that. So with that, I'm going to pause for a second because that was a lot of information hitting the definition of DevOps. You know, the course abstract said we're going to get appreciation of the DevOps Test Engineer role. And we see that nearly half of the folks on this call are starting to employ some DevOps. And more than half the folks on this call are members of quality or testing teams, or they have been in the past. So this is an important question. I mean, I just gave an example where the historical role of a tester is more or less automated. So what is the DevOps Test Engineer role? This is exciting. So the DevOps Institute curriculum for DTE and many experts in the field advocate for cross-functional teams developing the automation. That means everyone is part of it. Whether you're a developer, you're a tester, you're a BA, you're an architect, everyone is part of the DevOps Test Engineering team. Furthermore, some teams are going to have different strengths. We're not creating hard and fast rules. We're encouraging teams to self-organize. So the DTE curriculum has a really neat checklist it offers so that when you're self-organizing and you're letting teams use their strengths, you have a checklist to make sure all the key activities you need to get done are covered by somebody. Somebody's your primary, somebody's your secondary. It's a different way of thinking. So you might be, for this year, you're working on an agile team with, you know, Bob, Sue, and Jim. Bob's really good at this, Sue's really good at that, Jim's really good at that. A year and a half from now, you've got a new set of people. You've got, you know, I can't come up with 3 more names, but they're different things. So you go through that same checklist, you make sure all the same work is getting done, but they're done by different people. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of or seen openings for something called full stack engineers. Let me roll the clock back since you all have figured out I've been in this field a long time, and in the early 90s when I was first developing commercial grade software. It was before we had started to find efficiency by developing, you know, central testing teams. I actually, once I got specs sent over to me as a developer, I would go sit with my BA, ask questions, but then I'd go right to the business and I'd ask more questions with a deeper understanding of what the data and the tool, how they worked and how the data were organized. So I would ask more questions, clarifying questions, and then I'd start running my unit test scenarios. How am I going to test this? And then from there, I'd start writing my code. And then I'd run all my tests, and before I merged my code with anyone else's, I made sure it worked because I didn't want anyone else finding rinky-dink defects. I wanted to be able to find my own defects. With DevOps, we've made a return to that programmer analyst role of the early 90s and late 80s. Those are full stack engineers. They're people who can use the full stack of tools across that whole journey. If you are a semi-DevOps shop, your journey probably looks more like the bell curve. If you're a full DevOps shop, your journey looks like the figure 8. But a full stack engineer can use all the tools throughout that. It's really cool. It's really a neat opportunity. But it all depends on a culture. The biggest showstopper, and the DTE curriculum talks about this a lot, the biggest showstopper for getting good at DevOps test engineering is culture. I'll tell you guys, I had hardest time of bringing my team up to speed was that my partners and stakeholders expected us to be that end-of-the-line test team. They didn't expect us to be doing continuous testing. They did not expect us. So what we had to do was start forming partnerships and work in areas where that culture could actually happen. We need developers to understand that they develop test scripts. We need QA resources to understand that they write automated scripts. We need BAs to be involved in this. The culture is really driven by leadership, and if we don't make the change, the DT curriculum, I love the word, they use the word friction. We create friction. I know with about half the team, you guys are all on this journey right now. If half of you are experiencing this, you can think of the friction right now. You can think of that conversation, and it's really, you're coming from different sets of thinking, different mindsets. Back when my team first experimented with static testing, and my business partner made me give up 2 weeks of testing to get the 2 weeks of static requirements. He was really mad at me. I'll tell you what, he told me that IT already stunk and was slow, and I'd actually made it worse. That's what he said when we were in the middle of our negotiation. When we finished the project, there's actually somebody trimming hedges right outside my window. This is hilarious.
And it's okay. We can hear it, but it's not. But we can still hear you quite clearly. I just wanted to give you also just a time check. It's 11:42.
Ooh, it's 11:42.
Yeah.
Okay. Then I'm gonna fly through this. But so we finished this, and he says to me, "Why have you not done this on every project?" I'm like, "Oh my gosh! 6 months ago you told me I ruined IT. And now you're saying, why haven't you done this?" But that's because the culture hadn't allowed for it before. But once we made that change and we got fans, then the culture enabled it. So let's get into the meat. We got about 15 minutes, and you guys all need to go back to your day jobs. So how do we deal with the challenges? So I did some brainstorming on what are the reasons that this doesn't work. The first one is there's a lack of understanding about what continuous testing is. Also, organizations don't plan for continuous testing. They haven't put time into the project plan, like me talking with my business partner. I had to negotiate it. So we've got those scenarios. We also don't necessarily have the skills. When I first started, no one on my team knew how to write automation. We were also really confused about the tools that we needed. There's Selenium, Cucumber, QTP. There's what tools do we need? Also, we were trying to add these practices while we were in the middle of delivering on our commitments. And people upstream, i.e. the developers, didn't want to add continuous testing tasks. And all in all, we weren't a DevOps shop. So I realized that continuous testing is not about a massive organizational transformation. It's not. It is, what are my exact words? It's like a commitment. It's a good habit. It's a commitment to good habit. It is like adopting health. So I came up, what are common excuses for not getting healthy? Because continuous testing is, or our vendor partners don't do it, continuous testing is the same thing as embedding healthy practices into your lifestyle. So the same tactics we're going to use to get healthy, we're going to use to get healthy with our testing method. So a litany of excuses. I don't know where to start. I don't have time to plan meals. Purse is expensive. I have no idea what broccoli sprouts are, and I hate going to the gym. All valid excuses. But the first strategy when you're trying to adopt a change and you're trying to develop good habits, this is not culture transformation, you guys, it's good habits. Be realistic, right? And stop worrying about what you can't control. When you're trying to get healthy, you're not trying to get into the Olympics. You're trying to be the best you every day so that you're not exhausted when you get home from work and so that you can really engage with your family and take that long walk with your dog. But don't worry about what you can't control. You're not going to change the fact that there's sugary cereal in the grocery store and sometimes you're going to want it. But it's little choices that we make every day, that I'm going to move every day. I'm going to lift some weights, I'm going to stretch, and I'm going to walk away from the sugary cereal and I'm going to focus on the produce. How does that apply? Well, we get 8 reasons at the start of this why DevOps can't work. We can immediately eliminate 4 of them from our worry cycle because they're things we can't control, like the sugary cereal in the grocery store. You have to walk right past it. But what you can control, make a plan to worry about them. So that's adoption strategy number 1. Adoption strategy number 2 is ask for help. When I first started my journey to get healthy, I had no idea where to start. I didn't, we always had homemade hot fudge on the stove in my house growing up, and my mom, this is just between the 150 of us on the call, but she actually used to drive close to joggers in the street in the 70s because she couldn't understand why people were out running in the street when they should be at home, right? So I didn't know anything about eating healthy or about exercising, so I asked for help. When you go to adopt these changes, let's look at the ones we can. Ask for help. We don't have the skills we need. Well, engage your HR business partner and the learning and development organization. Ask some of your vendors, right? You can do that. When you're looking at processes and there's a lack of understanding, get a coach. Get a DevOps coach or a process consultant, someone who's done it before, and ask for help. We don't know what tools we need. Well, your coach has probably been through this before, and grab some folks from architecture and dev. There is help out there for you. The next thing is really important. This one flattens me, you guys. If you're getting healthy, you got to know your numbers, right? You get these panels at work. They come in and draw your blood, and they give you your numbers. Know your numbers and why this matters. Remember, continuous testing says business relevance. So what's relevant to your business? These are my favorite quadrants. Come up with your own classification, but know about your production health. Are your backlogs look the way you want to do? Is your regression efficient and effective? If you're working on projects and delivery, can you start predicting your success? And I talked earlier about the quality of the defects you're finding in system tests. What do they say about your processes? Know your numbers. This is important because right now we have folks all over the place who are mixing apples and oranges. Get disciplined. Again, your coach can help you with this. Look at your test tools. Know your numbers. How many tools do you have? What versions are they? Are they duplicate? Do we have different teams using different instances? Do you have multiple tools that do the same thing? Are you spending extra licenses? If you ask these questions, you're going to know it's not good or bad or right or wrong. Is it where you want it to be? Like, know your numbers. Is your cholesterol where you want it to be? If not, what adjustments should you make? This is the same strategy for getting healthy with your testing. The next one is, I equate it to start small and use what you've got. If you decide you want to get healthy and you think the best way is you have sore ankles and knees, so you're going to become a distance cycler. So you go out and you buy a $2,500 bicycle and you come back from your first ride and you think, well, that stunk. I didn't like that at all. And it turns out you like running trails and hiking in the mountains nearby you where you could have bought a $150 pair of shoes and not a $2,500 bike. It's really important. Start small. Use what you've got. Go back. Let's dial back to the definition of DevOps testing. Automation is number 4 because you've got to do these other things to start small and use what you've got. Find a good partner. Wait, let me take it back to IT. Don't try to solve for the whole organization, you guys. You're not going to change an organization overnight, especially if you don't have C in your title. If you guys haven't read, I think it's The Lean Startup. It's a great book. They talk about build, measure, learn. Work in little increments. Have a partner. Know your baseline. That's your know your numbers. Start small. When I say use what you've got, calms, if those of you are familiar with DevOps, we've got 30% of you are certified. We know that CALMS stands for culture, automation, lean, measurement, and sharing. Focus on the culture. Focus on the lean, right? Use what you got. Start small. The next thing is focus on business outcomes. When I started getting healthy, I wasn't tracking every calorie and measuring my VO2 max and my squat power lift, weight, whatever. I was looking for some simple things. Could I make it home from work without falling asleep? Did I sleep through the night? Did I laugh every day? Was my weight where I wanted it to be? Those are easy numbers, but it was business outcomes. Was I having a good quality of life? And I think driving home safely without the head bobs that's a good indicator. When we are doing DevOps changes or continuous testing, there are only 5 things we ever look at. That's it. Don't do things tools because they're neat and they're cool and they're fun. Do them because they're going to help you grow your business and enhance your brand, reduce your risk, lower your cost, and be in compliance. Every reason you do this has got to fit into one of those. That applies to, people are going to say, what about associate engagement? But that actually lowers your cost and enhances your brand. So that's pretty powerful. So we got about 3 minutes left. And this is where I wanted to turn personal, you guys. And if I could do another poll, if I hadn't used up my polling maximum, I'd call for another poll. Let's ask these questions. Is everyone in your organization on board with DevOps? I'd have to answer no on your behalf. And does your boss support continuous testing? Maybe, if your boss understands what it is. And are the stakeholders looking for shift left, or they just want you to automate testing as a phase? I can tell you most of my stakeholders just wanted me to automate. They wanted that perception that quality was going faster. And did I have a cohesive tool set when I got started? Absolutely not. But guess what? So what? Right? So what? You're looking at the things we can control and we can't control. I couldn't control any of that, but what I could control was myself. So I joined the DevOps community and the movement. It started with educating myself. Equate it to your fitness journey. You're not going to be an expert overnight, but you actually have to join the gym. And oversharing, I have been friends for 10 years with a couple gals I met on a healthy eating message board. I know it sounds crazy, but we have exchanged recipes and ideas. Like, join the community, be part of the commitment, engage yourself. Change the people you surround yourself with. If you're surrounding yourself at work with the naysayers and the folks who don't want to experiment with it, then think about going to lunch with some new folks. So join and go to attend events, contribute to events, speak, teach, tell your story, make connections, seek certifications. I really like certifications, not for the fact that you get a badge, but for the fact that it exposes you to people and learning and ideas and habits, and you have to keep learning to maintain your certification. But you have a purpose, and I don't want anyone to give up. This is not easy, right? Changing yourself is not easy. Getting healthy is not easy, but then it becomes a habit. And continuous testing is a good habit. It's not a massive transformation. So my last story is when I first started on this journey 9 years ago. I joined a testing team, and I was leading it, and I got certified, and I believed everything my leaders told me, and I invited the gentleman leading the Agile transformation of my organization to come in and speak to us. And he builds up this empathy. He's like, you guys probably get code late, and you're the ones who have to work through the weekend, and you make all this possible, and we're all bought in. And then he turns this, he says to all of us, who told you to wait? Like stunned. He's like, why did you let this be a problem? Who told you to wait? If you want testing to be a better experience, get in there earlier. Nobody told you to sit and wait until development passed something to you. Boom. It was pretty profound. It's been with me now for years. So it's my question to you. Who told you to wait? And my dad always said, you're not going to learn any younger. So with that, 4 points from today. Making sure that you all know what continuous testing is, that you understand the definition, and that we've reordered it, right? You got the Wikipedia text, but we've reordered it, that you understand the role and that it applies to each one of us. You know that adopting this is just like getting healthy, and personally, it's a personal call to action. You have to drive the change yourself. And with that, Karen, I have hit my, I'm through my slides.
Outstanding, Ann. That was an incredible presentation. I loved your analogies that you used. Really helped us. Rose chimed in and she said, brilliant, thank you.
Thanks, I really enjoyed it.